One of the most effective tactics that you can use to debunk Washington, D.C.'s narrative about this story in Venezuela is to use contrast. Now, putting aside for a minute that D.C. has imported enormous quantities of oil from this country since 1998, when Chavez took power and introduced this concept called Chavismo. What is their plan for replacement? There is another country in the world that would be how DC would like Venezuela to operate. And it's just a little bit over here to the east. It's this country called Nigeria. Now, they also have just had presidential elections, and the person that is in charge of that country has openly tried to promote Sharia around the world. He actually has used the military to control his people and is one of the most corrupt people on the planet. I speak of a man named Muhammadu Buhari. But he's been invited to the White House, had handshakes and big smiles from our leader, and signed deals. Now, what's the difference? The difference, and I've alluded to this before, if you really want to see what happens when you introduce hands-off, complete hands-off, laissez-faire, bourgeoisie capitalism and free market into a country like this, you have an extreme few, and I mean a tiny, tiny few people that get insanely wealthy, and then you have vast throngs of unbelievably poor people. And this is very recent from there. 50 people missing after an oil pipeline explodes in Nembe, Nigeria. Now, I don't think I probably have to convince my audience that Nigeria is not a great vacation spot, yet prior to the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, Venezuela has been one of the most desired vacation spots around the world. In fact, Aruba is right off its northern coast, and other than the issue with Natalie Holloway, quite safe. And yes, I know the Dutch control that colony, but nevertheless, it's a great contrast to make. One of the other arguments that people make about this issue in Venezuela, and if you ever hear this, you can bring this topic up. They say, well, regardless of that, everything water under the bridge now, we can't allow Russia and or China to get bases in our hemisphere. Really? What if I told you they already had them and they were within the territory of our allies? Yes, that's right. In Argentina, there is a massive space monitoring base that has been built by the Chinese. It's been there for a very long time, and of course it's being used for military purposes. They, of course, wink, wink, nod, nod, said, oh, it's just for civilian research, but nobody with any reasonable amount of understanding of the geopolitical situation in the region would believe anything other than the Chinese wanted to set up a base. And we've allowed this. In fact, Mattis knew about this, traveled down there, made protest against it, got overruled. And now the new commanding general of Southern Command of the United States, Craig Fowler, informed the Committee of the Armed Services of the Senate that the Chinese presence and its activities in the installation of observation of deep space in Argentina are worrisome. Beijing could be violating the terms of its agreement with Argentina to carry out only civilian activities, you think? Maybe? And would be able to monitor and potentially target the U.S. space activities, allies, and partners. Yeah, that was the goal. And you can look up Neuquén, Neuquen, base in Argentina. It's very well known. Now, one thing I would like to end with in this video, I'm not going to make it very long, is I talk about the psychological operations training side of what we do here, the pay side of YouTube, the channel memberships, the $5 a month, and we also do it over at Patreon. There's dozens and dozens of videos over there. This particular commenter, Shirley Adair, it was only a couple hours ago, in one paragraph, was able to cram in 4 logic fallacies. Now, I don't think that this person meant to, and I'm not attempting to disparage this person because they are just using information given by the mainstream media. In her comment, she says, I do believe there's something fishy in Venezuela, but I think your assessment of it is wrong. And then she goes and proceeds to use all of the fake news, basically, for lack of a better term, put out by our government. And I would like to cover this today because it's rare that I get an opportunity to do so much in such a small, short period of time. So I'm going to read her comment and then I'm going to read my response to it. This is Shirley Adair. Okay, I will not tell you that you are completely wrong, but there are a few things I would like to point out. First, the U.S. military is always training for things, jungles, deserts, icy mountains. Even the Navy has been training for air control in seas that imitate the North Atlantic, simulating an advance on Russia. That, in and of itself, does not prove intent. Okay, what she's referring to here is I have made a couple of allegations that the U.S. has stepped up its training, its jungle training, and it's a very different kind of warfare. You have to address it specifically. I will go ahead and give her that point that I can show that the U.S. is doing this. Doesn't necessarily prove intent. That is correct. However, given what's going on in the world, I cannot imagine the level to which it would be necessary other than the fact that, we have expressed a desire to show all options on the table. In fact, let me put it this way. We would be remiss, as the military would be remiss, if the leader of our country came out and said that, quote unquote, all options are on the table regarding Venezuela, and they didn't start to put an emphasis on jungle training. If it were going to be something that were a possibility. So she said it's called operational readiness. Absolutely right. Now, her next statement. The U.S. military takes all possible combat missions seriously, but does not really get, quote unquote, worried, as you stated. That's absolutely wrong. Having served, believe me, intelligence forces, people that try to assess what's coming down the road, actually do have quite a bit of anxiety. There was actually anxiety before the Gulf War. She said, yes, Venezuela has got some toys. That's a little bit of an understatement. She says, quote, we have more and mostly better ones, and above all, it won't matter that they have 12 anti-tank mobile missile launchers when we ground their planes and rain death from above the waves. Here's her first fallacy. Okay, she is referring to creating air supremacy from a carrier offshore. Very unlikely this could be achieved in any reasonable time frame in Venezuela, simply because not of the S-300s and soon-to-be S-400s that are there, they have 5,000 shoulder-launched Igla-S man-pads that are basically stingers. And I described trying to deal with those 5,000 stingers as playing the world's biggest game of whack-a-mole when you're blind. Because the jungle swallows up, and if you're trying to use any type of electronic heat-sensing device, those jungles are just big swaths of heat full of all sorts of life. It would be very, very difficult to try to pinpoint these, to take them all out, to make a clean corridor for our jets to get in to do their jobs. All right, she said, yes, we might have a few casualties, but not so many as you stated. The U.S. has the military ability to take on every nation on Earth and win, although in that scenario, they certainly would be heavy casualties in the beginning. Yes, you see, that's the problem. I think what this writer doesn't understand is that if we were to go in and we wouldn't immediately have it turn out like it did in the Gulf, where there were jets being shot down, where there were dozens and dozens of deaths, and there was the media from their side showing this, that it wasn't going to be some kind of a cakewalk. I think the support would drain away for the war, just like what happened in Vietnam, but way worse. She said, still, the ability to make war does not in itself justify starting one. Very correct. She said, second, congressmen and senators routinely go to foreign countries to check out, quote unquote, for themselves what is actually going on. This is her second fallacy. We have not had open diplomatic relations with Venezuela for a very long time. And the Venezuelan military doesn't hide what they have, but to say that we have some type of special intelligence because of diplomatic back and forth is not true regarding Venezuela. She continues, it's a good idea, at least in theory. Third, the U.S. has recently become a major exporter of oil. Big time, you might want to update your research on that. Anybody who's watched my videos knows that I am very keenly aware of the U.S.'s role in the oil markets and how they have used it to foment the situation in Venezuela. Becoming an exporter of oil doesn't mean we're not an importer of oil. That's a huge fallacy. We're still the second largest importer of oil in the world, only behind China now. And the vast majority of oil that we pump comes right out of the ground, goes into tankers, leaves this country, and lines the pockets of the people that own those big oil companies. That's the difference between the U.S. and places like Venezuela. The U.S. does not have in its constitution or anywhere in its governmental mission statement, that the resources of this country belong to the people of this country. They only belong to the companies that are pumping them out of the ground. All right, she continues. Now, maybe you're right that there's something fishy in Venezuela. I mean, how shocking would it be to discover that our alphabet boys have been engaging in the destabilization of a foreign government? Because I'm sure they've never done that before, right? Well, I don't know. Maybe a drug deal went bad. Well, that's an understatement. She said, I wouldn't argue the point of you calling a foul right now, but there's something with your narrative that is as off as the intentional lies the government tells. Not calling you a liar. Maybe it's all the video I've seen of the Venezuelans eating from garbage cans and being fired upon by their own government that you say is so rare. It's all over the net, man. She said, still thanks for making the video and a thumbs up for a heads up. Now, real quick, if you bring a comment like this and you make good points and you're polite about it, I'll let it through. I have been accused of redacting and deleting people that don't agree with me. I redact and delete people that are total assholes and douchebags and use filthy language to do it and attack me personally. But I'll let this through, absolutely. In fact, I'll even show you the video this is on. This is a 2/20/19 actual footage of Venezuelan army in action. This is where I was attempting to debunk that Angry Cops guy, where he was showing this one video that really doesn't represent them well. Her last fallacy, the fourth fallacy, though, it's all that video of Venezuelans eating from garbage cans. First of all, we have that happen here. Second of all, the mainstream media playing the same 6 or 8 clips over and over again over the last 3 to 4 years does not make it cumulative. They aren't showing new people showing up at the dump to start picking through. Yes, absolutely. Was there a financial crisis? Sure was. Were there shortages of food in certain places? Absolutely. Did it cause a major hiccup in their society? Absolutely. Was it the cause of socialism? No. Is Nicolas Maduro an evil dictator? No. Was there military forces that were being employed to put down protesters? Absolutely. They were the violent Warimba protesters that were burning government supporters alive in the streets. They were heavily armed. In fact, the vast majority of these protesters against the government are financed by the drug gangs down there, which is what makes this idea of letting Venezuelans in because of Nicolas Maduro, as opposed to the Hondurans or the Nicaraguans or the El Salvadorians or Guatemalans, ridiculous. We're going to use our military to keep those people from the border, but these people over here from Venezuela, that we're going to let them in? The idea here is that the media is showing you one side of the story. One side. And that's it. They have a narrative they want you to believe, and they know the tactics that they are needing to employ to do it. I don't think they were counting on people with knowledge of those tactics coming to social media and delineating them for the American people in a way that they can understand. It's why I've continued to invite people, please, if you would like to partake and understand the 24 basic cognitive biases and the 24 basic logic fallacies that all human beings suffer from, no matter who you are, knowledge is power. And we would love to have you. If you go to the Florida Maquis YouTube page, right below the banner, to the right a little bit, it'll say big blue button, says join. $5 a month. $1.25 a week. And I drop videos 3 or 4 times at least a week. So it's something that there needs to be some type of a delineation between the normal audience and those who want to take the next step. And I do have a Patreon channel that has 5 different levels. We're going to be doing something very different there in the next week or two. We're going to be talking about states' rights. And we're going to be talking about why each of the 50 states has the ability to govern itself as its own independent country, and why that would make the U.S. a much stronger place, not weaker. Washington, D.C. is making us weaker. And if you had to destroy a country and you had to only take out one target versus taking out 50 independent targets, which would be easier? And we'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.